Hi, I'm Larry Dignan with Constellation Research, and we're here with Andy Weinstein. He is CEO of Godot and runs a Pepsi bottle company. Hey, Andy, thanks for joining us, and congrats on the AI150.
Thank you so much. It's a kind of an honor to receive it after so many years of, let's say, dabbling in AI across an old school business, which is beverage distribution, and a new school business, which is turning waste into hydrogen and CO2.
Yeah, and I think we probably met 3 years ago when we were thrown on a panel together in CCE at the last minute. They usually are last minute. And so I've been following your story for a while. And you just have some interesting use cases. So I guess let's just start with the origin story of the Pepsi bottling stuff and how you wound up, trying to turn waste into power.
Yeah, well, so the origin of being a Pepsi franchise started in 1937 when we were actually Apple wholesalers. We had a company called Crenshaw Bloxham, and one day a lawyer from Pepsi showed up and was like, "Hey, do you want to sell Pepsi?" And all we had to do was kind of prove that we were capable, and that's what we did. So in 1937, we started to produce Pepsi in Central Washington and sell it locally in Wenatchee. Wenatchee is also the Apple capital of the world. And through actually a series of our conversations, I ended up getting into waste energy completely by accident. It really started in 2022 at CCE when I was making a presentation about kind of the data set necessary to automate the global supply chain. And that attracted the attention of a plastic exec who our subsequent conversation kind of opened my eyes to what was very obvious, is that every truck goes out full, comes back empty. Now, how can I monetize that empty return? By bringing in feedstocks. What I originally started with was plastics. And then as I moved kind of down the line, I found out that we have just so many apples that I could use the apple waste and the local ag waste as kind of a feedstock for both carbonation of our beverages as well as fuel for our trucks. And so it's been a crazy journey of learning, and in the process of learning, having to use AI tools to try to catch up in an industry that I'm pretty much a new person in it. So I'm the rookie.
So I've heard some of your use cases for AI over the years, between the bottling company and, the waste company or energy waste to energy company. Walk me through how you've been using AI on the I guess the old school business with the Pepsi bottling. I know you've had some use cases that were, I remember they stuck out with me.
Okay, yeah. So one of the first use cases is we did management training. And the key of using AI for management training is you're able to run through a scenario before it becomes a real world scenario. And so we were able to essentially create these modules that people could ask questions and kind of dry run a conflict within an organization. And what it ended up doing was really training our staff not to say, "Can you do this for me?" but asking them to, "What are your thoughts on this?" And so it changes the spectrum of any conversation between a manager and an employee from a binary do this or not do this to what are your thoughts on this, and giving the full spectrum and making it collaborative. And from that use case alone, we saw a reduction of errors in our warehouse by 75%. It was one of these like, oh, wow, the human behavior is what's triggering the real returns, and the AI is that kind of tool to do so. And so that was one of our first use cases of AI. And then what we've also done is doing back office AI. In old school businesses, you have a lot of processes that are not, let's say, written down anywhere.
Hmm?
And so in a weird way, by using an AI tool and having to prep your data and your processes and your workflows, you are able to then document how you actually get stuff done versus what is, sitting in Laura's brain or Armando's brain or whoever is managing it. So we're using AI tools both as a way to make humans more human in a weird way, and at the same time identify what are our essentially undocumented processes. And that was really our first two steps into AI from a beverage perspective.
So I remember the HR use case, and I know part of the returns was you had basically a lot of family members collaborating, right? And that's where the AI kind of helps things smooth things out.
No, we had, a family business. You deal with family business stuff on the background. I don't know if we've ever smoothed it out. I think that's an ongoing issue. But what we're able to do is essentially keep a path forward where the family members are not as interrupting of the business operations. That makes sense.
And what was the vendor you used?
So we use a vendor called SimSola. They're the AI came out of years of research from psychology and also work practices. So the founder, Tammy Wang, came from Korn Ferry, and she was the head of AI. And then she also brought on Zach Rossum, Dr. Zach Rossum, who is a psychologist. And so putting them together and creating kind of a solution that allows people to learn without feeling like they're learning. If that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, because the knock on HR stuff is that you get these modules and then you just kind of moan, and then you click, get through, check the box, and move on. So what you learn is, it's a little debatable sometimes.
Well, yeah, and that's why we had to, on the front end, we designed the scenarios, right? What is a realistic scenario that would happen, and what is a realistic response of interacting? And obviously, the best way to create these modules is to take real world scenarios and then tweak the people, location, etc. And when you're in this business for a long time, you've seen a lot of things. And most times it's not a single person at fault. It is a miscommunication across an entire value chain, right? And so being able to create modules that identify those miscommunications and then allow the participants to create their own solutions. So when you hit that real time scenario, it just feels like you've practiced for it, if that makes sense. And your reflection is no longer one of anger or frustration. It's like one of problem solving. And I really can't stress that enough, is the collaborative nature of what AI has brought to us versus the competitive or the blame game approach that we had before. It's really been transformational on the inside.
And on the back end, what have you learned from using the AI on the back end? Because, in the time that, you've kind of been on this journey, AI has changed a lot in that time. It's become more capable. It's, a little more unwieldy. I guess, how's the progression on the back end of your business changed?
So I think on the back end piece is something that still needs to be worked on for everybody. We have just really dirty data, right? Somebody put in a product years ago, they misspelled one number, they put the wrong EPC, or they just had a filler for weight. So all of a sudden, where the quality of our data matters, we are realizing how bad that quality is. But then again, that's led me to create tools that help clean our own data. So I've created my own AI ops platform that helps address it with what we call a data generator, and it just cleans data and it identifies what product it was supposed to be meant for, and cleans up the stuff that's no longer correct. So from that standpoint, it's really about having that good, clean data on the back end that we know no company has. And the benefit, I would also say, is because we don't have that many established processes, because we're, again, traditional Whenever somebody says traditional, it means we have less apps, essentially, right? We're old school physical world. And so I have essentially less things to clean up because there's less tools that are already in the tool belt, if that makes sense.
So did you cook that tool up yourself? I know you've been playing with vibe coding and all that stuff a good bit.
Yeah, for the data janitor, yeah, I did that, yeah.
Okay.
And
is it easier since you don't necessarily have legacy systems? Your legacy systems would probably be paper and a bunch of other things. Is that?
Yeah. It's really easy to go from a better database of your inventory when it literally is coming from a yellow notepad that had been edited with things in the column, and then we put into an Excel. So going to something more formative like Artisan AI, it feels like a massive step up.
Right. And where are you, I guess, in that journey in terms of, cleaning up your data, using it on the back end of the business?
So we are pretty far deep in it. So our data cleaning tool, just like last week, for example, I cleaned 95% of the data so that we're able to put it into a concept graph. And we developed this with former Amazon folks. We developed a concept graph that we can have sovereign and localized so that we don't need to depend on the changing whims of Anthropic, ChatGPT, or whoever, and whatever government allows us to use the model and not allow us to use the model. Because I think one of the big differences that you're starting to realize in this game is the quality of the model does matter, but the harness and the data is actually where is the repeatable business, if that makes sense. It's like,
right. So how do you set this up so you're not like boxed into any one vendor or model or any, how do you give yourself that optionality?
Yeah, we're creating our own sovereign AI that is going to be localized, and then we've built an AI ops platform that helps bring in all this stuff, so we're not dependent. We can pull in any products. We've created kind of a middleware tool to help translate the data, and so that's also enabled us to create multimodal data in and multimodal data out that just did not exist and could not have existed if we didn't have both vibe coding tools and then the understand that we don't know what we're doing and hand it off to professionals to professionalize it is also a very key learning, as people that are running vibe coded solutions at scale or in an enterprise are going to have a lot of problems because they're not asking what is going to break, where somebody who actually has a computer science degree or has done this at somebody like Amazon is going to be like, oh, this is not going to work. This is a one-time use structure architecture versus something stable that we can go on multiple days, multiple weeks, multiple years.
Does that mean you built your own data center, or you just have a few servers laying around? How did you make this localized? Or are you buying a bunch of those new NVIDIA machines? Like, what are you?
No, so actually, we're actually using some of the old. So we're gonna repurpose some of these old computers that were left over in the building that we just got from Anheuser-Busch, and we're string them along, similar to the way that kind of Box.com did. It was like string a bunch of computers and realize that they can store things. We have some of these old servers that we can buy for cheap, and the reason why we can localize the model is there's just not much. We're not doing the full training of the model. It's only training off of our data. It's not necessarily we're not going out and competing with Anthropic. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah, you're not trying to boil the ocean. You're just trying to run the business.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which is also a key lesson, because a lot of companies are trying to boil the ocean right now when
Yeah, I think there's multiple lessons that are happening at this moment. Is first of all, there's people who understand the tools. There's then people who understand the business, and then people who understand how the tools can help the business. And I think the problem is we're having the direction being led the other way, right? It's like I have this tool to sell you, buy it, and then we'll figure out how we find value. And you realize that that's just not how your business operates. You need to start from how do I solve a business problem first, and then what tool do I choose to solve that business problem, and versus the other way around, which is where we see a lot of people doing AI for AI's sake.
Well, I think that's the big tension point right now. It's really that, you know, the vendors are leading you one way, and by the way, in a private preview that may or may not show up in 2026. And then, you know, you have to choose to follow along or kind of do your own thing that probably makes more sense. It's interesting tug of war. So let's get into your other business. How has that developed? I remember, you know, a few years ago we had talked about it, and now it seems like it's sort of hitting, you know, it's kind of hitting its stride a little bit.
Yeah. So when I first presented at CCE, we were talking about, you know, the data of how to essentially accelerate PPE across the globe because we were dealing with COVID.
Right.
So just from that, I started to realize that I had to track the data using a lot of different inputs. That same tracking system is essentially the underlying piece to our AIOps platform. And the AIOps platform, which we call School, when it allows me to build this entire ecosystem around it, where I can find piles of waste, I can find different ways to process it into a common output, which we call modern coal, but it's biogenic hydrochar, and we use hot water and pressure to create the slurry, and then we use a vacuum press, and now you have a solid fuel and you have clean water. You got kind of two things, and it's just started to take off because it's a demand that exists, right? It's not an artificial demand. People have these waste streams that they don't have a solution for, and there's rules and laws that are forcing them to address it on one side. And on the other side, we're seeing that there is a higher demand for CO2. And since I already have a distribution system and that sells CO2 with the Pepsi side, it just made it obvious where it's like, oh, now what's the other output if I'm taking the CO2 out? The other output is either electrons or hydrogen. Well, guess what? My trucks can go on hydrogen, or I can power data centers using electrons. And the big kind of aha moment is before at $7 a kilo for hydrogen, it would be cheaper per mile than diesel. Now with the Iran war, we have way more room at over $10. But because I'm not in the energy space until recently, I chose to use existing technology that kind of have less risk. And so I could generate hydrogen pretty cheaply just using gasification of a solid fuel. And I'm just copying the Chinese model of like Linji, where they've created their entire hydrogen ecosystem. I'm doing the same thing. So as this, learning has progressed, I'm starting to find more piles and more demand. And it's a very interesting game because I also am collecting more and more professionals in the space, and you start to realize how small of a space it is. There's just not that many people in the hydrogen space. So now all of a sudden I'm here. I am now with the Pepsi side. I am the chair of the H2 operators for H2MI, which is Hydrogen Mobility Initiative in Washington State. And that's being led by Washington State University. But I'm also on the production side. So I get to be at the table in an industry that I used to not even know really existed. And so it's been fascinating to kind of go along with the ride and find yourself in a position of leadership just because essentially everybody moved away, and it's given us kind of a last man standing experience.
So are your trucks running on hydrogen mostly?
Not yet. We had to produce it. No, we are in the fundraising part, but we have partners who have hydrogen trucks. We have already in Wenatchee, in Douglas County, we have a hydrogen production facility that is run by the Public Utility District. They also have 2 stations. One is live, and it's selling hydrogen at $4 a kilo. That is essentially 50 cents on the dollar to your diesel cost per mile. So if we get a truck, what we pay more in CapEx, we're going to make less, we're going to save in OpEx. And from a tax standpoint, that's actually beneficial.
And do you see this waste model playing into AI data centers at some point?
Yes, because they have no other way of getting water and power that they currently have. So I see, in Wenatchee, we have about 50 data centers between East Wenatchee and Wenatchee. Mm-hmm. And so we have multiple data centers that are interested in backup power in that area, primarily because they're running on diesel. And so when you have somebody like Microsoft saying, we're going to get out of diesel by 2030, they don't actually have another option besides a biofuel, which is essentially a waste to energy fuel.
Right.
And you can consider modern coal a biofuel. So I expect all of that to be moving away from diesel and into waste to energy.
And that'll open up your market pretty dramatically, right? Or could.
I would say it already has. Okay. The difficulty is it's complicated to be on the inside of a double-sided marketplace, right?
Right.
But the benefit is once it hits. And quite frankly, none of these data centers are going to get the backup power or the cooling if they don't consider local resources. And those local resources are our waste streams.
So you see AI data centers almost being, because that your model works where you are, right? Because you have apples and all this stuff running around. So do you think AI data centers are basically going to be kind of localized based on resource? So it won't be one standardized setup. It'll be whatever's can be supported in that local environment.
Yeah, I actually think in the long run, we're going to see data centers be small modular. And I think they're going to be hyper localized. From a standpoint of latency, and if we're going to get into kind of robotic swarms in your warehouse or something like that, you're going to need that data center on site because any delay in time can essentially be an accident waiting to happen.
Right.
So I really believe that the mega data center approaches are essentially futile because they're demanding too much from the local community without showing any real return to that community. Right? Nobody in Utah is really excited about selling all of the power that they have in the entire state, giving up all the water that they don't actually have in their entire state for a data center that benefits them in no way possible because all of the tax benefits that were kind of given to them to have that data center built there. I think that model is hitting its wall. And I think, Kevin O'Leary just happens to be the face of it. Mm. But I think from a building out and an operation standpoint, data centers are going to be like your own server racks. Like we're going to go back to on-prem data centers. It's just that it's going to look very different and it's going to change like the way you power them and cool them and power your warehouse and cool your warehouse or your business operations.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir on that one. I was you're just recently wondering, I'm like, what if our AI infrastructure is kind of already in place and we're kind of kicking it 1995 with, the localized infrastructure, and then we just need some peer-to-peer way to change to basically consolidate and utilize the compute, and then we kind of solved AI inference a decent bit.
Yeah, it feels like it's almost like Direct Connect and Napster.
Yeah,
Like
I was thinking that. Yeah,
it's
we're
just an
showing our
evolution.
age, by the way, but
What?
yeah, it's
Oh yeah,
it
yeah.
seems it makes sense.
It makes sense. You just things are like the cost of compute is going to go down. The cost of delivery is going to go up. And so therefore you're going to make it closer and closer to you. And you're not going to be able to get the big transformers outside your building. So you're going to want a small data center, and you're going to want to be able to host all of that. And then at night, you're going to lend out whatever excess compute you have because you're not running your operation. And you build out a network like that. And then it's going to be funny because you'll have India running off of the latent network of the US, and the US running off the latent network of India, right? Because we're on different time zones. That's the world that I see is going to happen down the line. We'll see if it all comes to fruition, but I hope so. I think.
I think it'll happen. It just depends on it's just timing, and that we've oriented an entire economy about building giant AI mainframe and factories all over the place. Which I wonder how that plays out, but we'll see.
Well, don't bet against a circular bet.
Exactly.
Like, because the problem is they're all incentivized for this. The question is, who is the last one holding the bag?
Yeah. And we'll find out soon enough. So, anything I didn't ask that I should have?
I think one of the key components about just any type of business operation is, why are you doing it, right? Like, why do I care about turning the apples into the fuel, the carbonation, the fuel? Why did I get into this space when it was clearly kind of adjacent but not my forte? And I think part of the reason is when you run a business and you are a business owner, you think of your business into different divisions, and you end up having to think of it as your fleet. You're basically, I have a full leasing company. Now, how do I make the best leasing company possible to myself, right? You have a warehouse. How do I store things? How do I bring in product? How do I let product go out the door? I have marketing. And so I think one of the things that really drives me is I love the system engineering that's involved. And so just going from one industry to the next, I can see the commonality of the same type of systems that are there. The beverage industry, whether is old school, physical, real world stuff, but doesn't include a lot of sensors and infrastructure. In oil and gas and energy, it's old school as well, right? But it includes the sensors, and it has a little bit more of that data kind of management. But there's still, at the end of the day, the people that go out there with the wrenches and get dirt under their fingernails. So for me, it's like what brought me into this is my curiosity as an owner and looking at my business across many divisions and how those learnings can apply to other industries. And you just start to find more and more commonality across all these businesses.
All right. Good stuff. And thanks for joining us. Very informative and educational chat.